A lot of times we have this cool off period in the September of the year after the halving cycle. And so it's very common. And also in the past, whenever we've had these rate cuts, we actually had this kind of pullback. So like this is all normal. And from the information that I'm gathering, as long as the weekly close above 100K, the bull market is still intact. Welcome back to Network Spotlight, the Mick and Mike edition. I'm Mick. That's Mike. We've got our 25 basis point rate cut that's in last week. And the question now is what's going to happen moving forward? How does this impact the market? So we're going to discuss that. Also, MetaMask is in the news with their token launch, as well as a project that is taking on Hyperliquid. So we'll give you guys the scoop on that as well. Let's start with the main story, which is the rate cuts. Federal Reserve decided to cut rates last week. And based on the conversation, Mike, it seems like the main catalyst for this was the unemployment data. And so that's the biggest reason why they decided to do rate cuts. Inflation is still a problem in the United States. So that's the counter argument as to why we may not have additional rate cuts. So a lot of eyeballs on this and what Jerome Powell is going to talk about on Tuesday and how core PCE data is going to come out on Friday. There's a lot of big headlines coming out this week that I think will really tell us what's going to happen for the rest of the market.
They adjusted those jobs downward by hundreds of thousands of jobs, and I have no idea how they adjust that data and how it comes in, but certainly that was the big catalyst for cutting the benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage points. And yeah, I mean, like, look, the whole name of the game right now is uncertainty, right? The Fed is just not sure what's going to happen with inflation. You know, Trump keeps pushing for more rate cuts, and they did signal the possibility of 2 more rate cuts before the end of the year. But it's just they're in a tough position, man. You know, like you said, there's trying to balance unemployment with inflation. It's a very, very strange kind of macroeconomic environment right now.
The past doesn't always repeat itself, but it does tend to rhyme. And so I follow along some pretty smart individuals, like, for instance, Benjamin Cohen is somebody that is extremely reputable in the space. Doesn't always get it right, but
Of course.
he just lays out what happens based on history. And so a lot of times we have this cool off period in the September of the year after the halving cycle. And so it's very common. And also in the past, whenever we've had these rate cuts, we actually had this kind of pullback. So like this is all normal. And from the information that I'm gathering, as long as the weekly close above 100K, the bull market is still intact. Obviously, a lot of things can play out between now and next month, but October also tends to be the most bullish month. They call it Uptober. So could it be that this is just setting up for another leg up, like a lot of analysts are saying? I don't know. I do think that we're closer to the end of the cycle, right? Just based off of what's happening. But if this is the beginning of the rate cuts and people are projecting 3 total between now and the end of the year, well, if you count the one that we just had last week, I mean, this could be really good for risk on assets like crypto. And from news perspective, I mean, it's nothing but good news. Like, I'm not hearing anything about like some of these DATs, deleveraging, or, I'm not hearing any of those types of news that you typically hear when you're entering a bear market.
Yeah. And I think the story, I think there's always 2 sides to the story, right? You can look at the positives, like you mentioned, the Fed, the possibility of 2 more rate cuts before the end of the year. That will, theoretically move investors towards more risk on assets like crypto. The ETFs are, the money is flowing to ETFs, not only Bitcoin and Ether, but there's many others that are being spun up now for Link, for Doge, for all kinds of assets, digital asset treasuries, still very active on the public markets. There's still concerns about the weakness of the dollar. And of course, with real usage, the adoption, there's tons of momentum around tokenization and real world assets and stablecoin adoptions. There are a lot of good things to talk about there's always the possibility of the bad things happening, right? There's still a ton of uncertainty. There are wars going on. There are, like there's still tariff uncertainty. There's, there's a lot of bad things that can happen, but I think there are a lot of great signs that point to a much larger rally that could happen in lockstep with these rate cuts that might happen before the end of the year.
There's no shortage of good news coming out, and some of these news could be interpreted as bad news depending on how you look at it. So Lubin, who is the founder of Consensus and MetaMask, so they said that they're going to have a native token coming soon for MetaMask. Give us the breakdown of this story, Mike, and then I want to ask you a few questions about the long-term implications of this.
Yeah. So the Mask token was officially announced by Consensus CEO and founder Joe Lubin, and he said that it is coming sooner than you would expect, whatever that means, right? So, yeah, it's looking at the utility will enable voting, governance on protocol upgrades and new features, rewarding active participants and who isn't use an active participant of MetaMask. Most of us are. Many people are on board to using MetaMask, and there's also talk of integrating the Mask token with their recently launched MUSD stablecoin, which I believe just hit like $65 million in circulation after just about a week of launching. So doing well there. I like what Consensus is doing, right? Like they're they're decentralizing a lot of their products. Earlier this month, their L2 Linea launched its native asset with a TGE that distributed over 9 billion tokens to eligible addresses. So yeah, they're in token launch mode right now, and look, MetaMask is I don't know, 35 million monthly active users. I think 40 million monthly active users. There's certainly going to be a lot of users who are going to receive the airdrop.
I'm just wondering if this just is putting a band-aid on things when it comes to user experience. So I think if you compare Phantom to MetaMask, it's pretty clear that Phantom has a better UX
Yeah,
than
sure.
MetaMask. I think a lot of people would agree,
Yes,
even though
absolutely.
MetaMask is tried and true. It's been in the industry for some time. And I'm just wondering if this is just a way for them to try to get more users, which never comes to be, it's never a good idea. You're enticing users to use your platform by having this token. I just don't think it solves the actual problem, which is the user experience. It's a problem that we have in Web3. And just adding a token, I don't think it's just going to make it better, right? It's just going to attract people that they want the airdrops, they want to get in early, and then they'll disappear. You look at what Frentech, what happened to them, they were one of the largest social fi platforms, and 94% of the users left as soon as there was no incentive for them to use the platform. I don't know. I know a lot of people are looking at this as like a great piece of news, but I would argue that this is probably not good news.
I don't think it's major. I mean, I don't think that look, MetaMask is clearly in like a very different stage of a lot of these newer products that incentivize their users to use the platform in the expectation of an airdrop, right? I mean, look, like MetaMask, like you mentioned, they've got like 40 million monthly active users. So it's not like the token launch is I don't know. I don't think it's going to move the needle all that much for them, right? I mean, even if it moves, 5 to 10% more per month, like that's still a decent amount of users. But overall, like they've got millions and millions and millions of users already. So no, I don't know if that's going to be the core component of their token launch. I mean, I think because there's so many users, it's not like the airdrop is going to be at least in my mind, a meaningful amount of money to every one of these users. So I kind of just think it's like almost a nothing burger, right? Like this is something that has been expected for many, many years. They kind of tiptoed around the idea, and it's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to, I think it's way too late for this token to have kind of any real interest or impact. I mean, I think you're right. There's certainly a lot of other wallets out there that have better UX. I will say that MetaMask has improved their UX, but they've always kind of been focused on security and have been slow to integrate some of those newer, snazzier features that some of the other wallets have been able to implement. I just don't I just don't think this is gonna be such a mover.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, we'll see. Meanwhile, there's another very established name, CZ. He's been showing this platform, Aster, and Aster is supposed to be this competitor to Hyperliquid. And you give us the background of the story, Mike, and then I'll share with you what observation I'm starting to make when it comes to this particular story.
Forget about off the top of my head, but Aster was a kind of a merger between two protocols, one of which was backed by Easy Labs, which used to be Binance Labs, and so essentially they're a decentralized perps exchange that is a head-to-head competitor with Hyperliquid. They held its TG last week, and it was CZ pumped it. Mr. Beast bought over 100K worth of the token, and the token did almost 100x in less than a week. After those two very popular personalities supported the token publicly, they briefly hit $2 billion in TVL following the token launch. Now it's sitting around 1.16 billion, and it is like everyone wants to talk about the token. That's kind of what took all the headlines. There's an interesting innovation here. So for the most part, these perp dexes, right? We talked about how Hyperliquid mostly uses USDC as its primary stablecoin. So Aster's innovation allows users to employ yield-bearing assets as margin for perps trading. So they're allowed to both earn passive yield on the same capital that they use for active trading. So that kind of gives them multiple income streams using this single platform. So that's a very interesting incentive. But of course, when you got CZ backing, you got Mr. Beast backing it, that token's certainly going to do very well. And yeah, that's what it showed with almost 100x in just a few days.
Yeah, so this is the chart that shows the differences between Aster, Hyperliquid, and DYDX. I'm sensing a pattern here, Mike, and this is beyond just crypto, just tech in general when it comes to global power. So we have Tesla, right? You could say it's Western Hemisphere. And then you have BYD
Yep.
in Asia, right?
Yep.
That's like the Tesla competitor. If you look at crypto, you've got Coinbase, Binance, right? Two of the largest. Binance has BSC, so they have a chain, they have a token. Now, Coinbase has Base, and they're getting ready to launch a token. And now you have Hyperliquid, which was a successful model, and so it's being created. Aster is primarily, it's available everywhere, but my understanding is its origination is Asia. That's where you get a lot of the users. I'm starting to feel like if you have a successful model, whether it's in the East or whether it's in the West, you just have to replicate it in the other part of the world and it'll be successful.
Yeah, it is. We like to think of crypto as being such a decentralized global 24/7 industry, but those
It's no different. It's no different from regular tech.
I mean, there are a lot of the geographies absolutely matter, right? You talked about USDT and how much that was used on Tron in China and in Southeast Asia. And a lot of it has to do with regulations, and how the government treats crypto. A lot of it has to do with the state of the financial environments in some of these countries. And yeah, and look, and a lot of it has to do with kind of like the influence that some of these personalities and founders have, and where they're from, and the communities and the audiences that they've built. Like, again, I still think that you do have, crypto can go across borders way more easily than many other industries, but there is still that element of geography that no doubt has a massive impact on how successful products are, and where those users reside. No doubt about it.
Not financial advice for our audience, of course, but you, Mike, as an investor, do you now look at that as one of the factors to consider when choosing to make an investment?
Yeah, totally. On many different levels, right? Like, you've got, if there are ways for projects to differentiate based on geography, because if the founder has some strength that pertains to geography and access to a specific market or understanding of a specific market, that absolutely is a great way to start. So you can kind of find white space with different areas, with geography, with a certain part of a product feature that might be missing, that you can wedge in a certain part of the market, that a certain target audience that has been underserved by some of the larger companies. So that is, geography is certainly one of the aspects of a market that can be, where a startup can attack, that is a white space that is not addressed by larger companies. So absolutely.
Yeah, it's just like to your point, we're supposed to be this decentralized, distributed, vertical, right? Market. And in reality, it's just a newer version of tech.
Yeah, but I do also do think that you can wedge in and use a certain geography to find your way into your market. And if those markets are large enough, you could just have a very successful product out the gate. But again, it's like, I think crypto, there are ways to go cross border more easily than in traditional markets, especially ones that have to you know have to be have to have a completely different understanding of a new market and a new target segment of customers. But yeah, certainly those geographic constraints or strengths, yeah, certainly exist still with crypto.
All right. So let's move on to the part of our conversation where you share with us three different projects that have secured funding. These are also part of your newsletter that you put out once a month. For those that want to check it out, deepventures.io, there's a newsletter Mike puts together. Very interesting. It helps us to understand what is the latest technology, where are the eyeballs at when it comes to venture capitalists, when it comes to investors. So the first one we're going to pay attention to today is intuition systems.
Intuition is a semantic knowledge graph. They raised 2.13 million in a public sale on CoinList. So they enable users to kind of contribute, verify, and monetize, like, their opinions, essentially. So forming an open data layer for for crypto, for AI agents, for dApps. And it's kind of like a incentivized community notes, I think, is how I would put it, where users can publish their knowledge and their claims on chain. They can stake assets to express conviction. So, like, if you had a really good point, make that you made about some project, I can say, oh, that's some great research. I'm going to stake some tokens on your opinion and your input. You can earn rewards for accurate data, and then participate in the governance of the protocol. So very much like community notes. There's, you can address misinformation, you can address dispute facts, and also, add your insight into certain topics. So a very interesting way of incentivizing knowledge sharing and making sure that the knowledge is out there is correct and accurate, and not misinformation.
There's a huge like emphasis on data. I was talking to a team not maybe a couple of weeks ago called Worky.app, and their whole thing is Twitter data, but it's specifically audio data because you've got all these like Twitter Spaces, so there's a lot of data that's being generated there that a lot of these platforms are not taking advantage of, and the response from the network spotlight community was huge. There's a lot of people that are interested in data right now, and rightfully so, because data feeds into the LLMs, and that's how you get your AI models. So
So what
this,
does Lurky do? Does it take those like the Twitter space content and then
yeah,
parse it out
and
for
puts them
certain
in
uses?
essentially in one. Right. It'll break down what projects were talked about. Right. So there's like this like mind share, kind of like Kaido. Larger squares means like more attention towards that specific project. But Kaido, my understanding, is primarily like text based, like what you would find in terms of like written content. This is primarily audio content, so
Interesting.
it's slightly different pivot. Yeah, it was very interesting. I actually recorded it, so I'll have to do another episode and update the community on that. But yeah, so the emphasis on data has been huge. And the other part that I found interesting, and maybe Intuition is doing something similar, which is you can determine which individuals, when they speak about certain projects, which one actually moves the needle. So you have like a price chart, and then also the points at which certain individuals spoke about that specific project. So you can determine who's actually moving the needle in the market. Thought that was
Cool.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what's this. I know we're looking at intuition, and it's it says better data, but like, yeah, this feels more like beyond data, like knowledge, right? Like, I think there's a lot of um there are, there's a big movement on, incentivizing, kind of putting personal data out there in a, of course, in a private manner to train AI models, and users can get compensated for providing their own data. And I think certainly that's useful. I think it's gonna be a while till before that's gonna be done well at scale. Yeah, I think this is more on the lines of actual knowledge, right? It's like we are putting out knowledge, on social media, and like you said, on spaces, or on YouTube videos and things along those lines. I think a lot of it is, there's certainly ways to incentivize that, and kind of have markets around how accurate or how valuable those insights are. And I think these types of models, and it really can only be done with crypto.
Next on our list is Epoch Protocol. What are they up to?
Yeah, so Epoch is a coordination and intent layer. They raised 1.2 million in a pre-seed round from L2 Iterative Ventures, Alchemy Capital, G20, and others. So this is a chain abstraction protocol, abstracts away the complexities of interacting with multiple blockchains and protocols, enables seamless, automated, and modular execution of cross-chain transactions and DeFi strategies through intents. And the reason why I highlight it is because I kind of feel that, like, we talk a lot about, and not just us, but like the industry talks a lot about not even knowing when we're going cross-chain, when to getting to that user experience of making a couple of clicks and not having to go through a bridge and then minting and burning to go to another blockchain. And then we see that problem all the time. And it's really one of the most important kind of infrastructure narratives to really push the industry forward in terms of user experience. It hasn't made much noise lately. we had so many. We've had a bunch of intent based narratives, chain abstraction narratives that was hot for a while. And I still think they're very important, but that space has really died down. Is why I wanted to highlight Epoch with the fundraise in the last week, because I really think it is important and it needs to be really proliferated to improve the UX that we talk about that is so bad for crypto.
So essentially, what they're doing is they're helping users to be able to very easily switch from one asset to another, right? From Ethereum, a token on Ethereum to a token on Solana, for instance, right? Without having to use bridging, just making it very seamless, as less clicks as possible. Because as we know, using bridges, there's like multiple steps usually that need to happen. And so this essentially is their mission is to essentially help with that cumbersome process.
Yeah, and it's not just limited to switching one asset from one chain to another. It's like actually executing actions. So let's say if I wanted to deploy my my USDC on Ethereum to a lending pool on Solana, things like that, right? Like you can actually execute strategies and very easily instead of just swapping assets. So yeah, it goes beyond that. But with intent, it's just like, all right, what's the end result that you want? Not necessarily just every step that you have to take to get there, right? This makes it all easy and seamless on the back end.
Last but not least, Stablecore.
Yeah, so Stablecore raised a really big $20 million round. They are in a stablecoin integration platform for banks. They raised a round from Norwest Venture Partners with participation from Coinbase Ventures, Bank Tech Ventures, and others. And what they do is they enable banks and credit unions to integrate stablecoins and digital asset products seamlessly into their banking experience. And so stablecoin payments, digital asset treasuries, tokenized deposits, crypto collateralized lending. So really extending these banks' product portfolio to crypto. And what's super interesting is that their focus is on the little guys, the regional banks, the community banks, the credit unions. Which, according to some estimates, I was looking up someday, these smaller banks make up more than half of all the banks in the U.S. So certainly a area of a very sharp focus. And these are a lot of these smaller banks, like they don't have the resources to change all their processes, which are certainly very different than some of the larger banks like JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America. And so I really like that focus on these smaller regional banks and credit unions that and onboard these smaller banks to crypto, which a lot. I think these are kind of local communities, and I think to be able to usually they're the kind of the forgotten audiences, and bringing them on board to crypto can be really powerful.
It's good that they're getting a little bit of love too, because look, regardless of what we think about banks, I think that it's good to have a democracy, right? Not just have like the major banks rule everything and
That's right.
control everything. And a lot of times these community banks, they have great offers for their clients. And so it's great to have a solution that, because they also lag in technology, right? They don't
Yes,
have the money in order to have these like super user friendly mobile banking solutions that you would
that's right.
get with like Chase
Right.
or Bank of America. And so it's good that they're also getting a little bit of love from cutting edge technology here. So interesting. Thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I love, right? It's like it's the there's a this is that we talked a little bit about kind of the geographic wedge, right? This is kind of there's white space there, when many other stablecoin integration platforms are going after, the massive banks. This is where they can focus on this very specific target segment, really understand their processes, really understand the fact that they don't have this technology or the resources to be able to integrate it and really super serve that kind of forgotten customer.
Perfect. Well, that about does it, Mike. We covered it all from rate cuts to the latest and greatest technology. This was a lot of fun as always, and people can always go to deepventures.io to check out your newsletter. Follow Mike, give him a follow on X, and also subscribe to the channel, like the video, give us a follow, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
See you, everyone.
If you're a founder or operator in Web3 and want to connect with others like you, head on over to networkspotlight.io and apply to become a member. See you on the inside.